All right guys, great news. Our suspension parts finally came in, and if I want to get this thing running by summer, I got to get to it. So what I want to do is go through all these boxes, make sure everything's here, all our parts are accounted for. I actually want to go ahead and go through and weigh everything, because I weighed all the old parts, and I kind of want to see what the difference is going to be there. But I'm excited to have this stuff here so we can get to work, and let's just jump right into it. All right, there we go guys. This is my Scott's Hot Rods custom IFS, Front IFS system that I got. You can see, kind of went over the whole list. I think the only thing I'm really missing is bolts for the coilovers here. Just the mounting bolts for them. So I'll get a hold of them and see if they can send those out to me. But otherwise, it looks like everything else is here. I got 11-inch rotors that come with it. We got the coilovers. We got the rails that are actually supposed to be welded on each side. I don't know if I'll necessarily need them, but they sent them along. Well, I probably will end up using them, but we'll find out. So we got the power steering rack there, upper and lower control arms, the spindles, sway bar. We got the sway bar bushings and mounting brackets if we need them. I went with the Wilwood brake calipers and all the hardware there, mounting hardware and stuff, brake pads. I also picked up motor mounts for the Coyote that they make too. So I don't know if we'll have to see how well those work or not, but that's the whole kit there. I have one, before we can kind of test fit that cross member in, I have to finish cutting this cross member out. This basically is just bolted in for now, but Ford apparently put some welds on the frame here that I'll have to cut on each side, I think on the back side too. So I'll just take a Sawzall or something and try and cut that out, and we'll get that out of the way, and then we should be able to, our first step as far as getting that cross member in here. I actually thought that cross member would be more kind of V-shaped on the sides, but it's pretty much straight up and down, so hopefully that gives us a lot of room in there for the steering and any headers or anything that we're going to put in there, and motor mounts and stuff. So, but that's the kit. Everything looks good. Looks like it's there. Nothing's painted. So anything that I guess want to have powder coated or painted, I'll have to do that. But that'll come in time here. We'll have to get everything test fit, kind of tack welded in here. But we'll start with getting this out of the way. All right. So now that I got that cross member cut out, I went and weighed it, and so all this stuff that came off, all the front suspension cross members, shocks, hubs, all that stuff, and versus this was right around 206 pounds, and that was 269. So basically a difference of 63 pounds saved just going to this setup here. So it's not a huge difference, but might notice it. So I've kind of got most of this suspension, or at least one side, kind of mocked up here, just to kind of get an idea what it's going to look like. One of the first things they want you to do is to assemble one side. Basically they want you to find where the center line of the spindle would be, because that's the center line of your axle. And that's the lines that I had marked here, and then on the other side where the old ones were, I can still see I got the string tied here. What I did notice is there's a bolt right here for the inner fender. That's basically the center line. You can maybe see it on the other side over here, but I noticed that damn near lined right up with where my old line was when I went off the spindles of the old axles. But just kind of trying to get it mocked up here, see what it's going to look like. I did notice that it sure seems like these rails are a little bit, well, I figured a lot of this was going to sit way lower where the frame rail would be. I don't know if that's just the way they design these or what for my application, but from what I had measured before is, I guess we'll go from that angle here, but so before my spindle horizontal line was 4 inches below where my frame rail was. Now this spindle is almost horizontal with the bottom of this rail here, frame rail. So if I want the same ride height that I had before, I have to drop this whole frame rail down about 4 inches to get this to be where I need it to be. Otherwise, if I just was to cut this out and weld in that frame rail there, my wheel would be 4 inches higher in here, and that it just isn't going to work. I wanted to go with the same ride height, you know, that is adjustable, so I can go up or down a little bit, but we want, you know, the lower cross member to be sitting basically horizontal with the road at ride height, basically. It's going to ride better. It's going to steer better. You won't have as much bump steer because you want, you know, your rack and pinion here or your steering linkage to be parallel with this bottom lower A-arm. And yeah, I mean, I think I'm probably going to give them a call tomorrow just to double check before I start doing all this, but I'm going to try and get the center, kind of get some center marks on this frame rail here on the actual cross member, because when you kind of eye it up here, the spindle is pretty much dead center what this cross member is. So, you know, you're going to have a little bit of adjustment in all that stuff, but if I put a centering mark on this frame rail or this cross member, and also kind of put them on the frame rails here, then I should at least be able to get it in the truck, you know, and use that versus trying to line up these with it all assembled and everything. So, but this just helps kind of mock it up, see where it's at. One other thing that I have to ask them about too is the way this rack and pinion is sitting right now. I may have to turn this up, because right now it's laid back pretty good. I don't know if I'll be able to make that angle, because the way right now the shaft will come out to about here, I think, and then it hits the frame. Well, if that whole assembly is sitting lower, that's almost that much steeper that I have to go down and then into the rack and pinion. But that'll come later, I think, because if I turn this up any, I might have an engine mount sitting right here, I might have headers sitting here, all that, so that'll be later. But there again too, if I move this or twist this up, I would have to cut these off and re-weld it, but I would have to keep this, you know, in the same horizontal position just so I wouldn't have bump steer. You know, I can't raise or lower this really. I want to keep it where it is, but I would just have to rotate it. So, which isn't the worst thing in the world, just a little bit of making sure it's at the same level. But that, I think, we'll have to wait till we get it somewhat mocked up in the truck and figure out how our angles are going to work. You know, maybe that'll work out great, and I just have to put a double U-joint going into the steering sector, or the rack there. But I also need to call them. I don't think they didn't send me the bolts for the coilover, so that's the only thing I'm missing on here. But yeah, a little bit steps at a time, I guess, you know, make sure to do it right. So, but the way, if they want me to mount this lower, I'm almost mounting the top of that frame rail right here. So that frame would be way down here, you know, 4 inches here, going across here. So I would almost be coming straight off the rear here and just running straight, and then almost have to kick it up where the radiator is. So we'll see once I talk to them and just double check to make sure they didn't mess anything up, and that's the way it was supposed to be designed. But if I have to graft the frame rail that much, it might not be a bad thing, because all that stuff on top would be gone, and I would have probably more room for headers, or, you know, just more room up on top here. The engine wouldn't be quite so tight in that area, but the suspension would be fairly low here, but it would still work fine. So I'll talk to them about that, see what they say. But otherwise, we're just kind of making sure we got all our ducks in a row here before we start cutting. So I think I have my math right here, but I did tell them on my frame that the center line of the spindle was 4 1/4 lower than the frame rail. Well, currently, if I go off of the top of this frame rail here and come out, the center of this spindle is 4 1/4 lower. You know, if I kind of do some math here, right now it's at 4 3/4. You know, and if I go to the bottom of this one, it's right at 5. Now, so if you, and the top is 9, so if you go from the top down 4 1/4, that should be this 4 3/4 right there. So I do believe what I'm going to have to do is go ahead and weld this right to the bottom of my frame rail. And like I said, I'll call them just to double check, but you can kind of see, you know, this would be the center line. Well, this frame rail actually has a little bit of a rise to it right here on both sides. So I'll have to level that off, and you can kind of see I got a line drawn there. If I can weld, like about here is where that frame rail comes to here. So if I can cut right here, weld the top of that frame rail to the bottom of this one, and then I'll have to notch this just a little bit to make it level. And then basically graft the rest of the frame to that. I think that's what I'm going to end up doing, but a lot of this frame rail will be gone. You know, I'm not sure how I'm going to splice it here. I don't want to have to remove the cab or anything, so I don't want to go too far back this way. But I think I might somewhere right about here where I can still reach it and get in there and weld and grind and smooth it out. But whether I, you know, cut this side here out and take the top and bottom and kind of lay them down to here, but or fill it all in, I'm not sure. But yeah, we'll talk to them and get some better understanding of what needs to be done. But for the most part, this frame rail could just come straight across. Being there's nothing underneath here for suspension that has to move up and down with the, you know, like the twin I-beams around here. All that space, all these frame rails can be lowered straight. So yeah, I think it's going to be welded down here, and then we'll somehow kick it up. We have to mount the sway bar somewhere up in this area too, which I think I'll angle it at somewhat of a 45, I guess, and then mount the sway bar there so then it can come down. There again too, I don't know where I'm going to end up kind of splicing it in up here, but we'll figure that out. There's a cross member right here which I'd like to redo, but we'll leave it, you know, that'll be some other project a different day. But right about here I think we're going to end up kind of 45ing down and then back to go from there. But yeah, I mean, with all that cut out, there's going to be a lot more room for headers and whatnot. So maybe I don't have to necessarily create or make my own headers. Maybe I can buy a set that'll fit in there now with all that extra room. Even on the other side, where the alternator, you know, sits in this pocket here, there's more room for that. So now that a lot of that is gone, I could have even went with that Mustang front cover on here. Because that alternator was moved up and out, there would have been room for that. So either way, it is what it is now. But yeah, I think a lot of that frame is going to be lowered and cut out of the way. So it'll be interesting. All right, so after double checking with Scott's Hot Rods, basically my frame rail will be down below here. Basically what I already have the center line marked, which that's kind of the first thing you want to find front to back, the center line. And then after that, you're going to be adjusting your height of your frame rail. So that can be kind of tricky just depending on where you want the tire to sit. You kind of have to measure that out and even mock it up in here and almost put your wheel on and everything to make, just to double check that that's where you want it. But that's where we're going to get it tacked in and then double check all that to make sure that's the right height. But so first I'm going to just start notching away at the frame, so I can weld in those two little frame pieces that they sent along. We'll get them in there and kind of leave as much of the stock frame there and just kind of start cutting away and reinforcing and putting more frame rail in there and basically grafting it to that piece. So just kind of a little at a time. You know, you could just cut it all open and then, you know, run some bracing and stuff in there to hold everything kind of together. But I think I'm just going to cut away just as much as I need, just so it's still together, and we'll just kind of start welding it in and go from there. All right, so I got it mocked up in here, basically set. I don't have any tack welds on it yet. I'm about to do that. Basically got it all leveled. So I made sure this rail here was level. I also made sure that the cross member itself is level this way. And then also I made sure the cross member is level this way, left to right. So both sides, you know, double check, triple check, but measured under here and on top. I measured this rail, they're all level. Like I said, side to side's level. I also measured to make sure that the rails right here and here were squared, so I diagonal measured. Pretty much within a 1/16 of that. I also measured from the back of those rails to, I think I went to the transmission cross member, basically rivets. What you're looking for is something that's the same on both sides of the frame that you can measure off of. You know, the frame isn't necessarily the same on both sides in certain spots. There's kind of bolt holes there and there where that cross member is between the transmission cross member and this one. You could go off of that, but basically made sure that that was square. I measured diagonally there. Basically every spot you can kind of measure from. I also went to the bottom lower control arm bolts on each side and measured diagonally. So I measured, you know, made sure that the rails were squared, the cross member was squared, level, side to side. I also measured basically from the frame rail out to my fenders to make sure and see if I'm, you know, centered in between the fenders the same. Because on here, being this frame rail kind of kicks out further than that one, it's hard to, you know, make sure that you're square on everything. So, and the fenders could be off a little bit too, out, but you know, it's the best judgment just to make sure everything is square before you start tacking it in place. As far as side to side, I'm about a 1/16 as far as being centered between my string lines here. So I should be good there. It's about as square as I'm going to be, and you know, the rest as far as alignment will be able to be adjustable, so we should be pretty good. So next is basically tack everything. And then I don't know if I'll do both sides, but I'll throw at least one side together, mount the wheel and everything, see if that's the correct height that I want it to be as far as ride height. And then once we're at that point, then we can really start grafting more frame rail together, and you know, we won't fully weld it till we're all said and done, but it's coming along, guys. All right, I mocked it up quick, put the wheel on and everything. I think that's pretty good ride height. My jack keeps settling here a little bit, but should be about right there. You know, looks pretty centered left to right in the wheel well. I used to have about, oops, a finger or two up here. And right now it's just all tacked in there. Everything's level yet. You know, I just assembled, I don't have the upper A arm on. Control arm on because I have to cut away the frame to get to the backside bolts there. I didn't quite want to do that yet because I want to weld in some more frame back here, because there's not a whole, if I cut this out, there's not a whole lot of support for that lower one. So, but yeah, I think that's actually going to be perfect, man. I think it came out pretty good, the right height. This side should be the same. You know, I just put this beam here just to leave the lower control arm at the ride height that you want, or at ride height. You want that lower control arm level with the cross member, so that's why I put this under it, just so it sits there And yeah, if everything tacked in, I want to put in kind of a triangle piece back here next, and then probably put a 45 triangle piece here, and then I'll be able to take away, you know, the upper part of the frame rail, get rid of all that. So we're going to clear up a lot of space there for headers and stuff, hopefully. But I like it. Pretty happy that it turned out the way it did. You know, we'll be able to adjust the ride height a little bit if we want to lower that, but it matches the rear pretty good. I just want this thing to have maybe a slight rake forward, you know, down a little bit, if not nice and level. I might lower the rear just a little bit, because I know this, once we get some weight on here and stuff like that, and also we can lower it, you know, with the coil over. We can kind of adjust that as we want, or as we need. So, but no, I think that turned out pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. Forgot to mention too, these tires used to stick out about an inch or so on each side. I actually said if it's possible and there's room, you know, for the control arms to be shortened an inch on each side, I asked them to do that. And you know, this one's, I'll jack this up just a little bit. That should be in, but the tire's pretty level, man. That's just about flush. I don't think they quite took an inch. It's maybe like 5/8 or 3/4 they took off on each side. But those wheels are nice and flush now versus sticking out. Not that it looked that bad, but the rears were always nice and flush. So now the fronts are, so they match. And these rims are 17 by 8.5. This way, now that they're all four obviously the same, I can rotate them and stuff. I hate having staggered rims where once, you know, the fronts are a little bit narrower than the rear. This way I can rotate tires at any position and they'll fit just right. All right, you can see it's coming along. This is the driver's side here. Pretty much all fully modified. I have to fully weld it yet. Same with the other side, but you can kind of see right up here is the old frame. So I took that much out on top of this one here. I think it turned out pretty good. The only thing kind of left is once I get that other side, I kind of have to get right in here. This spot, this little angle piece up on the other side, built yet, and then I can cut that old frame rail out. But once I get that in there, then I'm going to mock this up both sides, and then get, I have to weld in the sway bar mounts or brackets right here. The one thing with the sway bar is it'd be nice to mount the bushing right to the bottom of the frame, but the way that sway bar is, it starts to curve almost right away or before it gets to the outside of this frame rail. So I have to have the brackets on the inside of the frame, and the way this angles up shouldn't be an issue, but I have to kind of mount the bracket a little crooked like that, and I might just have to extend the links. I'll show you that when I get to that point, but it's coming along. And like I said, just got to kind of make the other side over there. It should be a mirror image of this one. So I got the pattern, just got to get it cut out and get that kind of tack welded in there. Once we know where the sway bar mounts are going to go on the inside of the frame rails, got that all figured out, I can take all the suspension back off, and then I can fully weld all this in. I don't think I'll paint it yet because I want to somehow weld in the motor mounts, and then once kind of the motor mounts are all welded, then I should be able to fully paint all this and kind of touch this up. But one other thing too is I will have to, let's see if I can get on this side. Being the radiator, lower radiator hose comes out of here, I'll have to kind of notch this just a little bit, open some more. That's not going to be a big deal, and just so that clears. But I got to kind of put the engine back in here and figure out about how far back I notch that. Otherwise, yeah, coming along. All right, so I got the sway bar kind of mocked up here, half hanging here. This thing, you know, you basically have to get this thing attached with the rod links or the end links attached, just to kind of figure out where you're going to mount, where the bushings, sway bar bushing mounts and bushings would go. So kind of have it half hanging here. You almost need two people to do this, but I'm not quite sure how I want to mount this. If I should try and go flat like this, just kind of run it straight, almost straight off the bottom of the frame there, and then just fill all this in with a plate. You know, this I might, I could even leave it angled, or I could bend it straight up and down. But it's going to have to be mounted on just on the inside of each frame rail. And if I do it this way, then I just have to make a plate to fill that in, which would be plenty strong. But then that means I have to cut this or take this cross member off, which I don't know, I might do that. This frame right here is not perfectly lined up with this one here on this edge, so there'd be a little bit of a gap, or I might be able to just bend that or tweak that a little bit. But if I don't go flat, then I could go at an angle like this. If I kind of twist that down a little bit, see if I can get that turned. Try and basically parallel the same angle as the frame, and somehow get it sucked up just a little bit. And then, you know, if I was to bend both these tabs straight at a 90, then it would only kind of stick like that, but you know, the tabs would each be bent straight up and down. That would be a little bit simpler, I guess more squared off. And then all I have to do is kind of fill in the back there too, but there'd be more of this bracket, I guess, on the frame rail. Now, I do have to watch this side because of just the way the radiator hose comes off. I already have to notch this frame rail. So yeah, I'm not sure what I'm going to do here. I'm kind of leaning towards bending these at a 90 and mimicking the angle of the frame. If I get longer rod ends, which I might see if they have a longer set of these. Basically, you want the rod links straight up and down, and then you want the sway bar parallel as you can. You know, so if I get a little bit longer sway or rod links there, I can kind of suck this up tighter to the frame, and then this bracket doesn't have to stick down so far. But I have to watch it too, because I don't know if you can tell, it starts to curve almost right at this edge of the frame. It starts to curve in, so if I suck it up too far, and then when it wants to move up and down, it could catch the frame here a little bit. So I got to stick down a little bit. I almost should have just went straight with the frame rail underneath this other one, but there again I would have had to cut that front cross member out. So if you are doing this sort of setup, I'd just go ahead and cut that right out right away. So yeah, if I can get that at a 90, even up or down, just a little bit of an angle on the sway bar isn't going to hurt it. But I'm going to have to call them and see what they think about that. See if they have any ideas there. Take some pictures, send it off to them. So can't hurt to ask them before going and doing all this welding. But we'll get it figured out. So that's how I decided to go with the sway bar mounts. You know, I put the bracket in here, filled in that gap. This is the other side here. You can kind of see it, basically the same thing. You can see I basically figured out where my center line of the sway bar would be and marked it forward, and then just lined it up and tacked it all in there. So most of the frame modifications are done. I should be able to fully weld all this pretty soon here. One thing I want to do quick though is actually hang the motor in here. I kind of want to figure out where that hose is going to come out and see how much I got to notch this one and see if I need to reinforce it. I don't think I will. I'll just have to cut that open a little bit and kind of eyeball where my motor mounts are going to be. But one thing I'm a little bit concerned about is my alternator sits right in this area here, and it kind of sat in between the frame rail, you know, the C part of the frame rail where there was a gap. You know, it was well, I suppose the old frame rail is about right here, but even though this frame sits lower now. This upper control arm is right in that spot. I think the alternator is going to sit just in front of it, but that's what I'm a little worried. If that alternator is too far back and it's going to hit this, that's going to throw everything off. Basically, I just would have to redo the front accessory drive somehow, and I don't really want to do that, so I'm hoping it's just in front. From what I can tell, it'll sit just in front. I may need to notch this a little bit because of the alternator, but I want to get it hung in here and just double check. Also want to see if I should have plenty of room for the oil pan now. Before it was kind of hitting that cross member. Yeah, I think I got plenty there. The only thing I can see is maybe if I have to kind of just notch it out in the center, but I don't think so, the way as low as that one sits now, which is really nice. But once I kind of can test all that with the motor hanging in here, we should be able to fully weld this up and kind of move on to installing the rest of the suspension. Alright, I have a whole bunch of stuff mocked up here. Motor sitting in here, tranny's hooked up, motor mounts are bolted up to the engine. I got the steering rack, or the rack and pinion sitting in there. Steering linkage just kind of down here shooting out of the firewall. You can see I got the coolant hose on here. It's real close. I just cut this in half and spun it. Once again, this was a hose, bottom radiator hose off of a Fox Body Mustang, a 91 to be exact, I guess. So even the lower if I put this motor just a little bit lower, it don't damn near be touching there, but I'll just put a piece of pipe in between here and we should be good. I will have to notch this a little bit, because it's just hitting that. And then you can see the alternator is hitting there. So I might take that, and I want to kind of gusset this a little bit. That's what the tape is there for, but I might take and cut a kind of a triangle piece out of here, and on the other side there, cut it nice and even, and then just flip it so it's recessed in, and then I can massage it a little bit from there just to get that support back. Or I might just cut this triangle piece on top out and then just squish it together, kind of bend it over. We'll wait, I'll pull the motor back out and just see what's going to be a little bit easier there, but that should work there once I modify that. Once we get down in here, you can see where the power steering rack comes out. I should have plenty of room for steering linkage. If I kind of angle this other rod down in here, it's going to be something like that. I'll have to cut these shorter, but angles won't be too steep. I think we'll be okay. The only issue is where I'm going to put the U-joint up here, whether it's up higher or down lower. The higher I put it up here, it could hit the head. Might get in the way of this last exhaust port for the header. So I might have to kind of mount it somewhere in between the third and the fourth one in the rear here. So I don't know how I'm going to do that. I should have plenty of room for the headers. It'll be tight, but there should be room there. I think these two rear ones will go straight down. And then these two should have room to kind of come back and then go down on the side. But you can see I got the motor mount bolted up here. It's almost flush on the back side of this cross member. It's back a little bit. I'd like to actually make my own plate. I don't know, they put some spacers on the back of this one. The other side doesn't have it. But I don't need those spacers necessarily. I'd kind of like to move these motor mounts down further, and there's room where it shouldn't get in the way of the rack and pinion or the steering linkage. So I'd kind of like to move them down and then just forward a little bit. So I might end up actually just cutting this back plate off of here and even shortening this up a little bit. Try and cut that and just make my own backing plate here to bolt up, and then so it'll bolt lower and forward more, and I can kind of adjust it from there and get it tacked in place. I might actually do that on both sides. It's a little closer on this side than the other, but I'm trying to center it somewhat. But on this side, I more so want to move it down and forward, just because it'd be nice to run all my headers through this opening here. If you look, I have a lot more room up here now than I did before. It's not so close to the other frame rail, but either I run them all up and down back here. I thought about running 2 through this hole, 2 through this front here, you know, and then just maybe have to, if I want to remove the header or something, I just have to remove the motor mount at the same time. Just unbolt all that out. I don't know if that would work or not. Or I could run all 4 of them forward through the front and then down and back. I don't know if I'd like that, but that would be a lot simpler, or I'd have more room for it. But then I'm probably bringing all that heat up past the rack and pinion here, which I don't necessarily want to do. So if I can get this to maybe go down a little bit and move it forward just a little bit, I might gain enough room to run all the pipes through this spot here. Otherwise I'll probably just run it all straight back and go that route. But everything else seems to be clearing. Let's see if I can show you the oil pan. That's about how much room is there. I can come down just a hair. I don't think I'm going to notch that just yet. That could change, but you know, it's just catching that corner a little bit. So if I do want to come down with the motor quite a bit more or something like that, then I'd probably have to notch it. But I think where it's at, it's at a good roughly 3.5 degree angle right now, motor and tranny. I think that'll be okay. But otherwise, I kind of like, as far as the amount of room I'm going to have compared to the old way. It'll be a lot easier to get at the headers for mocking them up, just because I don't have the frame rail coming straight up kind of across the top here. But we'll get this notched here, get some of the rest of this kind of little frame modification done, and then we should really be able to fully weld everything. We'll wait with the motor mount brackets that'll go on. You know, if I can go right to this upright here on the cross member, that's what I'm going to aim for. Have it real simple. I got the brackets over here. They're just a simple straight bracket that'll go on each side like that, and you know, just cut them and modify them a little bit to fit whatever application you're going to need there. So if I can get them to fit in on this cross member, the easier that'll be. But otherwise, it is close with the alternator back here. Depending on how far I bring the motor to this side or that side, I can maybe fudge it just a little bit and go forward with the whole motor. I do have a little bit of room up front there, but right now we're not hitting right here. This is just kind of a plastic cover anyway on the back, but we should be able to be okay here. Once I notch this, then it's not rubbing there, and then we'll be okay. There we go, all fully welded. Got everything kind of smoothed out or ground down, so it looks nice. See, it turned out pretty good. I did put some gusset plates in here and on the other side, one on each side of each frame rail, just in that area. I tried to make it so most of the frame would kind of overlap joints and stuff, just so it's a little bit stronger that way. But that's the only spot right there that I have it welded kind of a clean all the way around. So I just wanted to put some gussets in there and just help make it a little bit stronger. But otherwise it turned out okay. I might mock up all the suspension, double check. I think we'll be all right, but I want to leave all this off. The control arms and the shocks and all that stuff. until I'm done with the headers, or so I can build the headers. It's just less that's in the way. But next I basically want to set the engine back in here and figure out where my motor mounts are going to be. And you know, I'm hoping to weld them right to this cross member, so I think they're going to be lined up pretty good. I did make some plates. I can kind of show you here. You know, these are the motor mounts that I had purchased, and I ended up cutting them just to make them a little bit shorter because they stick out a little bit further, and I might have to move this forward or down a little bit. I'd like to move them down, give me more header clearance. But so right now I basically just have plates bolted on there. You can see that one, and we'll get set in there, and then I can figure out where I'm going to have to tack those on there, you know, onto those plates, and then I'll have to bolt these up there, or you know, make a template and see about how I'm going to have to massage these or cut these so they fit in there. And once that's all kind of welded, or those plates are, you know, welded onto this cross member, then I should be able to paint all this. That'll be a good step there. I'm excited to get that stuff painted. I'll have to paint all the you know, control arms and stuff too. I don't know if I'll have them powder coated or just paint them, but it'll start coming together here pretty quick. All right, I got the motor back in here, mocked up. Got my actual motor mounts tack welded in here. Let's see if we can show these. You can kind of see I have the plates on the engine kind of just tacked in there for now. I got to fully weld them back up because I had to position them. And then I also have the brackets that go to the frame, just kind of tacked in place for now, right to that cross member. And kind of been mocking up both sides here. You can see I got the control arm here in there. There's trying to figure out how just the right amount of space here between the bolt and the alternator, and getting everything centered. I think we're going to be okay. To get this bolt out though, that alternator is going to have to come loose or get pulled out just to do that if I have to adjust the alignment on here. But I think I have enough room for headers. I'm not too worried about this side. We do have steering linkage that comes down right there. I have to cut that yet. I think I'm going to be all right as far as the angles of it. I do have the kind of the U-joint there on the steering rack. There's a chance I might still turn that up a little bit more vertical, but for right now it looks like if I kind of cut it back here on the shaft and then run another shaft down there, the two U-joints won't bind or anything, and I'll have plenty of room. I should have plenty of space here. If I can get a light, but you know, to have my headers run kind of up over the engine mount here and then down, there's plenty of space, I think, past the steering linkage to kind of come down, go through here and down. So I'm not too worried about this side. It's looking okay. I did have, after kind of mocking up the other fan that I was going to use, that Flexolite Black Magic fan, I think it's going to be too close, so I had this other one here that I'm probably going to try or use. The biggest thing I'm going to do with that radiator hose, I think I've showed you before how this will kind of fit in here, but get that out of the way a little bit. So I might have to trim this just a little bit to make it shorter, and then it kind of follows along and then starts to turn right in there, and I'm just going to push it right on here and put a hose clamp on there and try that. We'll see if that comes off or not, and then I might have to rethink things, but it does come fairly close to the power steering reservoir right there. Even if it's up against it, you know, I'd be okay, but I want to keep it It comes fairly close to, you know, the belt here too, so it kind of has to angle up a little bit over the top of that pulley, which I think will be fine once I get that on there. But what I was running into is that other fan, that shroud and everything is a lot thicker on here and also taller. And the way it comes is, or works out, if you can see, that fan blade sticks out past the shroud here. You know, that, what is that, maybe a 1/4 inch, half an inch or something like that. That hose comes right about here on top here. I'm not so much worried about the shroud itself, but the fan blade itself being that spinning and, you know, flexing a little bit. And same with the hose, if that expands when it gets hot, I think that would cut right through it. So this fan has already been modified. When I had it in my Mustang, I had tried to push the fan in there because I had clearance issues on that too. So this thing has been modified kind of to be as thin as possible, and I could probably modify it even more to get this fan blade to sit in there, and I don't know if it's just worth all the trouble. So that'll be kind of last case scenario if I do, or I'll just get a different fan. I've seen Flexolite makes a fan similar to this one that probably does better than this one, but we'll try this one out. I'll probably end up painting it black, get that chrome off of there, and see how that looks, but we'll give it a try. But that'll come later here. I also got this side. Let's see if we can see this side. This is where my issues are kind of at. I got this side all tacked up too for the motor mounts. Turned out pretty good. But trying to mock up, you know, the headers on here. And my hope was that I could get all four to run down between the starter and the motor mount here. That's why I had kind of cut the motor mounts apart, because I wanted to slide that forward and down as far as possible just to create some room in this area. After kind of mocking that up, it's just going to be way too tight. I mean, they would fit, but they would just about be touching all four, and there's not really any combination of the way they come in here. You know, whether to line them up, have them in a 4-pack, diamond shaped or whatever, they're just too tight in here, and I think everything would kind of be hot. And you also have the control arm that's kind of right here too, that bolts up. So just trying to think of how I could get all that to work. And you know, I could run a log style up here. I think there's enough where I could do a log style, maybe like a turbo header, and then just run it straight back over the top of the starter and down. Usually those are, what, 2.5 diameter probably, which is what I would run the exhaust is going to be 2.5 anyway. And, you know, just run it down through here, and they give me all kinds of room to get to the starter and everything else. But I don't really want to, I can't do a log style on the other side, so I don't necessarily want them mismatched and kind of looking goofy like that. So I'd still like to do kind of a long tube header type setup, or mid-length header. I think what I'm going to end up doing, it might look a little goofy, but I think I'm going to run 2 pipes here and then 2 pipes on this side, and just split, you know, the motor mount, and I think we'll be all right and kind of run it down. But then I run into where, you know, if you ever have to get the header off, then that motor mount is obviously in the way, or it's trapped on the motor mount. So what I decided to do is I'm going to make, I don't know if I'll do both sides, I might just do this side, but what I'm going to end up doing is making this, the brackets here that hold the motor mount to the frame, I'm going to make them removable or bolted on. This will be boxed in a little bit anyway, so it'll be kind of U-shaped or channeled. But I think what I'm going to do is just bolt it on. That way, if I want to take the header off, I can unbolt all of this right up, unbolt it from the engine and then unbolt it here. And kind of had thought of different ideas as far as what I'm going to do. Let me get on the other side here. How I wanted to actually bolt this on. I thought about actually just running bolts straight to here, but I don't know, this is probably 1/8 inch thick, and I didn't think that would be thick enough, just a thread or how I would run threads in there. But I think what I'm going to end up doing is just put maybe a 1-inch strip on each side here and weld it to the cross member, and then weld the plates here right to that tab. They shouldn't stick out too much. You'd still have room to get the header in and out. And most of the bulkiness of it will come off, and you should be able to get the header out and everything. So that's my plans. Still debating whether I should do both sides. It's not going to hurt, I guess. That way both sides can just be unbolted, or if in the future if you ever want to put a different engine and setup in here, you could make a different bracket and bolt it to those same tabs. So that's kind of my next step right now. But otherwise, kind of fully weld those motor mounts up, and we'll get these brackets here made, and then I think we're done with kind of frame modifications. Short of kind of once I'm done, I'm going to make some cross members. I'd like to put another cross member across the bottom here, just for support, and then there was one back here that I want to run across too, but we'll have to make those up, and those will just be bolted on, so that can be made way down the road, or next year or whatever. So right there we have it. Frame is pretty much done. Got it all painted up. I got 2 coats of Pour 15 on here, and then 2 coats of just a black top coat, just spray paint. But I guess all the frame modifications are done. Everything looks pretty good. Turned out real great. I think so. I'm going to leave all the suspension off for right now, just because I don't want it in the way when I do headers on this thing. But I can set the engine in here, and it should basically be in here to stay. So I'll get the transmission hooked up and all that stuff. I'll have put the steering rack in here. I still have to finish up the steering linkage here and figure out where I'm going to have the U-joints located. But kind of the next big part of this is going to be the exhaust headers. So I have to get parts for that yet, but once the engine's back in here, I can kind of let it stay in here, and I can mock them up. So there's still a lot left to do on this thing. We still have wiring and headers and interior to put back together, suspension to kind of paint up and put on, hoses and that sort of thing to mock up, or get hooked up, I should say. But I do have a drive shaft for it already, so that's ready to go. A lot of that big stuff is kind of ready to go, so it's going to boil down to some of the smaller stuff. Still waiting on a brake booster. That's supposed to be here in a couple weeks, I guess. That should hopefully just bolt right up, and we should be good to go there. So yeah, I guess I hope you guys like this stuff. This is, like I said, I'm getting excited, man, and it's a lot of fun to me. So hopefully it comes across, and hopefully you can kind of do something like this too on yours. But I do appreciate you guys watching. So stick around, there's more to come. We'll see you later, guys. Thanks.